Hello and welcome to Oregon Black Artists, an Oregon Folklife Network series elevating Black voices of Black traditional artists who talk about their work and how it connects to Black culture and the Black Lives Matter movement. Today I'm speaking with Wambui Machua of Beaverton, Oregon. Wambui is a traditional Kenyan chef and owner of Spice of Africa, a Portland-based African restaurant. Born in Nairobi, Kenya, and a member of the Kikuyu people, Kenya's largest ethnic group, Wambui learned to cook by watching her mother and grandmother. A natural entrepreneur, Wambui teaches African cooking classes, sells her food at the farmers markets, runs a successful catering business, and funds charitable projects in Kenya. Earlier this year, Wambui opened her first brick and mortar restaurant, Spice of Africa. Thank you for joining us, Wambui.
Thank you so much, Emily. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you.
Sure. Well, to start out, can you just describe some qualities of Kenyan cooking and give us a little background on how it expresses and connects you to your Black heritage?
Yes. Well, the food that I cook is mainly based on how I grew up, and the food that we grew in my home, because while I was born in Nairobi, I actually lived in the village. And so I had a dual life of going to school in the city and then living in the village. And in the village, I had a kitchen garden that I grew all sorts of vegetables, which was collard greens, cabbage, carrots, potatoes, and even bananas. And so being surrounded by all these produce actually got me my start into cooking and also being in part of farmers markets and taking that produce direct from my garden and into the kitchen, cooking our traditional foods like sukuma wiki, which is what we call collard greens, and ugali, which is a hot water cornbread. And even in my cooking classes, that's what I traditionally express, is how a rural family can take what they need in order to put food on the table, just going from your ingredients, traditionally the food that we grow ourselves, cooking it, and based on those dishes, that's how we express ourselves and our culture. Just by growing up eating these foods, and that's what I try to express, in my food and in the classes that I teach.
Thank you so much. So I've been fascinated by how practicing culture is different for different kinds of people, and I'm learning that for people of color, sometimes practicing your culture and makes you a bit of an activist or an advocate. And sometimes practicing culture at this level of excellence like you're doing, that puts you way out in the public and says very loud and proud, I'm here and I celebrate my culture, that can be a privilege for white people that white people take for granted, but it can be a risk for people of color. I'm curious if you've ever had that experience, or if you feel like practicing your culture puts you at risk at all.
In practicing my culture, I don't feel at risk in doing what I do, because that's who I am. And that's how I grew up, being a Kenyan and then immigrating to the United States and being of the Kikuyu tribe. So it's a question of, I know who I am, I know what my culture is, and my people, and I'm Kenyan. So I don't feel at risk by practicing my culture, by practicing what I know best. And I'm actually happy to teach others about my culture and to share my food with them. And I feel that, people learn through food and they gather around food. So it's a good teaching tool. And I take that and I use that. Now, however, on the other side, even though me being who I am and in practicing my culture, I feel that it doesn't pose a risk to me. I do feel that the fact that I'm a person of color, and I'm a Black person from Africa, from Kenya, I do feel that that can pose a risk for me. And it has in the past, because I've had experiences, things that have happened to me that have posed a risk by the fact that I am a person of color, but not necessarily by me being practicing my culture and my heritage.
Interesting. So, being a food provider, food creator, cultural artist feels really at home for you, and yet walking
Mhm.
around the world as a Black woman can sometimes put you at risk, or you experience some threats.
Yes, absolutely. And there are times when, yeah, would you like some examples?
If you would like to share, it's up to you.
Well, there is a time that I had, at this time, and that's why I was making that distinction, because there's a time when my daughter was 6 years old, and I walked into an establishment, a business and establishment, and I was doing a transaction over there, and I was holding my 6 years old daughter, and then the owner of that establishment, she and I did not see eye to eye, and she called the police on me. So now, her having called the police on me, I decided that because it was a disagreement and I wasn't going to get into an argument, I just said, okay, fine, go ahead and call the police. I will wait right over here and I will wait for them to come and we can see what we can do about it. And remember, at that time, I'm holding a 6-year-old, by the hand. So the police came over and we explained what this. She explained that the owner of the establishment explained what the situation was, and what happened was that because I'm a person of color and she was not a person of color, she decided to embellish and change the situation and lied to the police and said that I had actually left the establishment. And when I saw her calling the police, that is when I decided to come back. And my mouth just dropped open on hearing this while the police were listening to this. And they could see the shock on my face. So they ended up getting both stories of what had happened and actually ruled in my favor and said, no, this is wrong and this shouldn't have happened. And at that time, the business owner was refusing to give me a receipt for the transaction that I had already paid for. So the police had to insist for her to give me a receipt. And so that at least was solved amicably and nothing happened. But it's the fact that somebody can call the police on you expecting that they're the ones who are going to get the more positive outcome as opposed to you, while you're in the right, you haven't done anything wrong. And it's just traumatizing as well to know that you have your young child and your young child is actually seeing this happen to their parent while you're right there. So that can be quite traumatizing.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. I've been learning more and more about how Black parents have even more extensive teaching and coaching of their children, knowing that they will be raised in an environment, pardon me, where just walking around in being Black may cause them to be treated differently, and they need to be aware of it and need to be coached about what kinds of additional challenges and threats may be posed to them. Thanks for explaining what that has been like for you, at least one story. On a related question, a follow-up, I was thinking about what it must have been like for you to move from Kenya, where you were living as in a majority Black society, and coming to Oregon, where you became a minority. And I'm sure there are lots of differences in life, and maybe to focus in on your life as a Kenyan chef, but you can also think more broadly too about how has your life changed in being a Kenyan chef in Oregon other than being in Kenya?
Well, while I was in Kenya, I was not a chef. I wasn't a chef. I mainly was somebody who cooked at home for myself and for my family. And then I moved here. And actually, the plan wasn't to move here and live here. I was just actually exploring. At that time in my life, I was young. I was in my early 20s. I hadn't quite decided exactly what I was going to do with my life. So I was more in an exploratory, stage of my life. And I came to America, which wasn't the first time that I had come to America because I had been here previously as an exchange student and lived here with a host family for about a year and then been back and forth, visiting. So it wasn't my first time, but it was the first time that I decided to come on business. And I had opened up an African art business. And so I was selling curios and batiks and baskets. So I was just trying to figure out, is this what I want to do? Do I want to go into something else? So I ended up being here and doing that business, and it became quite successful. But then I also had some challenges as well. Uh, then I decided that I was going to explore that further, and I ended up staying, not uh, not by just by accident, actually. It's a long story that goes into how I actually came to stay in America because that story started back in Kenya. But I ended up staying over here and doing my African art business and ran into some challenges at that time because, like I said, I was young, I was naive, and I thought everybody was good in the world. So I had some people who took advantage of me that at that time I was living with, and they stole some of my artwork. I was living with them, and they ended up kicking me out of their home that I was living in at that time, and keeping my artwork and not paying for it. So I essentially ended up homeless and didn't have anywhere to go and didn't have a family over here. But I was introduced in my going ins and out. I had met a young Kenyan man, and he introduced me to another Kenyan family who were living over here in Oregon, and the other ones who actually took me under their wing after I was kicked out by this other person. And I started living with this family and the other ones who kind of helped me get back on my feet. I still had some artwork that I had sheltered. So not all of it was taken. The majority of it was stolen from me. And at this point, actually, my and the person who stole that artwork ended up stealing my purse, my ID, and my passport because it was all in my purse. So at that time I had no identity. I couldn't go back to Kenya, and I couldn't prove who I was in the US. I literally had nothing on me. I only had about $1 on me and nowhere to go. And so even though I had opened up a bank account, I couldn't go to the bank and prove that the money was mine because I had no ID. I had no ID, and there was no way. I had no passport. It had been stolen. So I couldn't prove who I was, and I had nothing. So, but anyway, I had some artwork, and I had a family, who took me in and who kind of helped me get back on my feet. I continued selling a little bit of my artwork. I was able to save a little bit of money, but a good ending to this story is that I finally got my passport back because the person who kicked me out, their neighbor, talked to them and told them what they did was wrong. And the only thing I ever got back was my passport out of everything else. And with that, I was able to at least continue to have an ID and to be able to prove who I was and not look over my shoulder all the time. But long story short is that I started out selling African art, and then later on, I transitioned into wanting to do food. in order to be able to express even more of myself. Even to this day, I still carry African art, and it's actually on my website as well. So I still do that on a very part-time, limited basis, especially around the holidays, so that I can offer them as gifts for people who want unique gifts around the Christmas holidays. However, I transitioned into food because I thought that I could reach more people that way. Because, like I say, people always gather around food. Food makes people happy, and I wanted to be in a situation where I was more helpful to people, more encouraging, and more and educating more, and just meeting people more, and gathering more. And that's how I transitioned from African art, and I went into food and became a chef. And that actually happened by another accident, by walking by PCC, Portland Community College, in Northeast Portland, and going into the campus over there and asking if I could teach cooking classes. And it was just a light bulb moment where I thought, oh, wow, I can do this. I just thought about it, walked in there, said, hey, this is what I want to do. They were very excited about it. They embraced the idea. They met with me. And at that time, in the early 2008, 2009, not a whole lot of cooking classes were being offered, especially African food cooking classes. So they were very excited about that. And that's how everything snowballed into me becoming a chef by starting with a series of cooking classes at Portland Community College.
Wow, what a journey. What an
Yes.
incredible story. And I can hear from it that you've always been an ambitious entrepreneur. It seems like you have a mind that tries to think of ways to share culture, but also serve people, and also educate and make money doing it so you can support yourself.
Yes. And I actually wrote a story about that one experience that I had because it was a very profound experience, that coming into America and thinking everything is all good and it's all working out, and then to have this happen to you, and you have absolutely no family over here and nobody to turn to. So I ended up writing a story, a personal story about that one experience, and I called it A Night to Remember. And that actually prompted me to start writing short stories. So I write short stories about my experiences and trying to bridge the gap between Kenya and growing up in Kenya and my experiences as an entrepreneur, as a young person, as a now older person, you know, living here in the US and in Oregon.
Wow. Are those also available on your website?
I will be making them available, yes.
Oh, that's great. I have just a couple other wrap-up questions. Well, before we wrap up, I want to hear a little bit more about how you're passing on your Kenyan culture in your family. I understand that your daughter does some cooking as well. What's her connection to her Kenyan and Kikuyu roots, and how do you help her sustain a healthy African identity?
The way that I do that, her name is Michaela, and she's now 17, going to be 18 soon. Oh my goodness. And the way I do that is I have taken her to Kenya a couple of times. So she's been to Kenya when she was 5 years old, and then again when she was 12 years old. And while she was 12 years old, we actually lived there for 4 months because we went on a book project where I partnered with Beaverton Rotary Club and Rotary International, and we shipped 2 containers of books. I think there were about 100,000 books, and those were to distribute to my village and surrounding schools, about 30 or more schools, so that they could build or have their own libraries. When I was growing up in my village, my entertainment was reading because I grew up with no electricity, no indoor plumbing, and no form of entertainment. I didn't have uh, a recreational center, YMCA, that I could go to. So my entertainment was reading books. So I read a lot. So Michaela and I went to this project and we lived there for 4 months. I enrolled her in school over there. So she was able to mix with the other kids. It was a boarding school. She was the only day scholar. And as day went by or weeks went by, all of a sudden, she decided she didn't want to be a day scholar anymore, and she wanted to be be in boarding school with the other kids. And that to me was a testimony of that she's doing well and she's getting along with the other kids, even though most of her life having been raised in America, that she was able to adjust and acclimate to her environment and assimilate into her environment and 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 get along with the other kids who were in that environment. So we did that project, and she was able to learn and embrace her Kikuyu culture by getting along with her cousins, with the rest of her family. I remember we went to a family reunion, and my family is pretty large in Kenya because my grandmother had 13 children. So those 13 children, I have a ton of cousins and uncles and second cousins and this. So we went to a family reunion and everybody was hugging and kissing her and saying, nice to meet you and all that. And she looks at all of them and she says, Mom, who are all these people? And I said, this is your family. This is your Kenyan family. And so when she's like, wow. So she has learned that other than the people that we do have over here in Oregon, which she has an uncle, she has cousins, and she has a grandmother over here in Oregon. She has a whole other family, a ton of them who are in Kenya, who she was pleased to meet with and engage with and interact with and go to school over there and see what the other side of that life is, and also share in the food. And then coming back over here, I have taught her how to cook. She learned how to cook when she was about 8 years old. And since then, she's been cooking. She can cook her own meals. I don't have to worry about her. But there are some differences, though, of her having grown up over here. And one major difference I can speak to is that the way I grew up eating food is that, especially our meat, we like our meat well done. She, on the other hand, enjoys rare steak. And we look at it and we're like, oh, no, 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 we can't eat that. That's raw. And she's like, no, this is the way to eat it. So there are some differences. But I can truly say that she has embraced her culture and, her heritage and her roots. And those trips back to Kenya have really helped with that.
Wow, how wonderful for her to know
Mm,
that there's a whole world of people who love her that are on the other side of the globe, but they are there loving her
mm,
every day.
yes, absolutely.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm,
Um, so just in wrapping up, before I share some ways that listeners and viewers can connect with you and eat your wonderful foods and learn possibly how to cook Kenyan style cuisine in their own homes. Um, what, if any, messages do you want to share about what others can do, whether personally or through an organization or as an institution, to help support Black artists in Oregon like you?
mm. Well, right now we're living through challenging times, unprecedented times, especially due to the COVID-19. And this is one time in my life where I was shocked. I was really, really shocked because we had a great year in 2019, and that spiraled us into opening our brick and mortar earlier this year in February. So from coming from such a banner year and opening up the brick and mortar in February, and then having to shut down in March after just being in 1 month in business was, to say the least, again, traumatic. Because you put all your energy into and your investment and your time and everything into opening this brick and mortar, thinking that you're going to have another wildly successful year. And from then on, it's going to be great. And then you're hit with something that nobody could have predicted at all. None of the world could have predicted this. So uh, going from that, I would just encourage people to really think about that and to really think about supporting the businesses, because this is one time in my life where I have felt my job literally came to a grinding halt. In 2019, I was doing cooking classes, I was doing street festivals, I was doing farmers markets, I was doing dinners, for people, all things related to food. And then when March 2020 hit, I did not have a job. Everything came to a grinding halt. No catering, no cooking classes, no dinners, no restaurants. But the saving grace that we had was that we still had farmers market. And remember, my life initially in Kenya started from farmers markets, because I would grow my food and I would take it to the farmers market in my village and sell my produce over there. And that's how I got my pocket money or my allowance. We were not given pocket money or allowance by our parents. You earned it. So I earned it by going to the market and selling at farmers market. So it seems like my cycle is come all the way full around, because that saved me when I was a child. And now it's the same thing that has saved me again uh, when this happened, because the only thing that I had left was farmers market. That was the only thing that was an essential service that was left, because everything else was gone. Cooking classes were gone, catering was gone, dinners were gone. Anything that had to do with people gathering was gone. So the only thing that I had left was farmers market. So I would encourage people to really support their farmers markets, because those really, really help small businesses. And then I would also encourage people to help Black-owned businesses, not just in light of Black Lives Matter and the racial injustice or social justice, but on an everyday basis. Because when all this goes away, or after, it's never going to get old, because racial injustice is racial injustice. We should all work every day towards making this an equitable, society for all of us. However, we do forget and we do move on with our lives. And when that happens, it's just remember that it's not, we don't just need your support just during this period. We need your support every single day. You know, when sales are up in the beginning 2 weeks, when all this happened, we want to continue with that. We want to continue with supporting Black-owned businesses, small businesses. Don't just do it when we are at uh, emotional standpoint, when we have all these emotions, with us, we're really feeling it. We're really feeling like we should do something. Let us feel like we should do something each and every day, each and every Saturday and Sunday. Come out to the farmers market, and during the week also, during the weekdays, there are other farmers markets as well, that you can support. So let's not just do it when we're feeling that we're emotional and we have to do something. Let's keep doing that. Let's keep supporting the small businesses and the Black-owned business every single day.
Wow. Wambui, thank you. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me and for speaking with me and for letting me tell my story, share my truth, and just to continue speaking to people.
You can find Wambui and at her new restaurant, Spice of Africa, on 722 Southeast 10th Avenue in Portland. That's inside the Morrison Market. They are open for dinner Tuesday through Sunday until 8 p.m. You can also register for and attend her cooking classes, which you can find online at spiceofafrica.com. Thank you all for joining us. Stay safe.
Thank you.